Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome once again to another Tuesday night session of the Pugilist Corner, brought to you by the Dog Pound. Uh, let's get all our commercial stuff out of the way here. As you can see uh, on our social media, we are known as West Coast Steeler Fan. You can check all our Facebook things out on James E. King III and our uh, on YouTube. You can catch us also, JE King 3. Our Cash App is $ JE King 3. Please subscribe, donate. All proceeds go to uh, the promotion of our channel and various good deeds around the country, especially dealing with our water and our youth. So, with that being said, let's get this show on the road tonight. Our special guest tonight is JM Champs Lee, and it's going to be a very interesting conversation. I think this is going to be educational as well, and we're going to learn a lot about Mr. JM and exactly what he does. And it should be, like I said, a very interesting conversation. So without further ado, let's put on, see if we can get Mr. JM in here, and we'll get our show on the road.
Hey there, good evening. How are you?
Good evening, sir. How are you doing this evening?
I'm terrific. I know it doesn't look like my camera's picking up, does it?
There you go.
That's my avatar.
Yeah.
But I can certainly go live.
Well,
Uh, it doesn't matter to me. Let's see what I see what it is right here. Boom. There we
all right.
go.
Okay,
It
there we
was
go.
yeah, it was in my camera settings.
How are you doing
Yeah,
this evening,
I'm
sir?
doing terrific. How about yourself?
As I always say, every day above ground is a good day. So I'm
Yes,
fine.
sir.
I'm fine. Uh, so tell the audience a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how you actually. Tell a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into some specifics.
Okay, great. Brother King, I am JM Champs. Champs is my brand. That's what a lot of people know me by. You can call me JM, so can your audience. I hail from the DC area, better known as the DMV. It's basically a tri-state area, even though DC isn't a state. It stands for DC, Maryland, and Virginia. Um, and here locally and nationally, I am a certified firearms instructor and a clinical hypnotherapist. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and I look forward to talk boxing and whatever else is on the menu. Some people say that I am somewhat of a boxing historian, so I guess you and your fans can be the judge of that.
Oh well, hey, great. That's great. My mentor was one of the greatest boxing historians ever. One this excuse me, Mr. Stewart, Emmanuel Stewart from the Crom Gym.
Nice.
Yeah, had always wanted to meet Emmanuel, and when I moved out here in 2003, they
Mhm.
were having fights out here in Pachanga,
Ah,
and that's where I first met Emmanuel, and then of course a few years later, much too soon, he passed away. Uh, but I want to talk about a couple things before we start talking boxing because there are a couple historical bouts that I want to kind of talk about because they happened. Uh, Maybe not today, but in close proximity to today.
okay.
Uh, So, but first, let's start out a firearms instructor.
Yes, sir.
Tell us a little bit about that. Of course, today, with all of the controversy and everything, surrounding firearms and whatnot, it's good to meet someone that's doing it the right way and teaching others to do it also. So, tell us a little bit about how you got into that particular field.
Absolutely. So, my introduction to firearms was through my dad, who served in the Korean War, Purple Heart. And during those times in the well, in my childhood in the early 70s, the fathers in the community would take the young men hunting. We'd go wild turkey hunting, deer hunting, wild boar hunting. And prior to doing that, we'd get orientated and educated in gun safety.
Now, this
Um,
doesn't sound like DC.
well, here's the beauty of DC. DC was at one time all Maryland, but Maryland sold territory to the federal government so it could have a nation's capital. So essentially, DC is the nucleus of the surrounding suburbs of Maryland and Virginia. So, very much like Pittsburgh, you could, after you leave the nucleus, you can be very rural and
Uh,
suburban. So
Okay.
they're very similar areas. Although we didn't wild boar hunt in this area, but we did wild turkey hunt. Matter of fact, wild turkey hunting season just ended November 9th here, and we're still in the midst of deer hunting season here. So that's how I got my orientation into firearms. And then as soon as I became of legal age, I believe in the Constitution. And that Constitution, that Second Amendment of the Constitution, gives us the inalienable right to bear arms. And so, um, for my own personal safety and protection, I believe in self reliance. I would rather bet on myself than to have to call another adult to come save me with a gun. And then the national average in terms of police response time is from 7 to 11 minutes. So a predator or an assailant can do a whole lot of damage in 7 to 11 minutes. So I'd rather bet on myself. So people began to know me as a person that was into firearms, and they would um, ask me to teach them, ask my opinion on purchases, and so the demand got so great, I said, hey, I might as well create a system, an infrastructure, um, um, legitimize it, organize it, incorporate it, and therefore we have the Champion Solutions Firearms Services brand. So that's how I became a firearms professional. And I would also like to mention that from the time that the pandemic began to now, there has been no other time in American history where more Black people have applied for firearms permits per the FBI NICS background check analytics. So I land right there. That's how I started in the firearms world.
Now, kind of sticking with that, I noticed that you are certified in more than one state. Now, is that like a driver's license where one size fits all? You apply in one state and you get or is there a process where you have to go through a national certification, a state certification? How does that exactly work?
So I am a national firearms instructor. I'm certified through the USCCA, that stands for the United States Concealed Carry Association. So that is a nationally recognized certifying body. And the way firearms instruction is, um, to answer your question, it's not like a driver's license where it's a universal. Um, it's not universal because while I can teach firearms in every state, I can't issue the certifications that lead to licensure in every state, but I can in most states. Uh, and so currently, I'm certified in Maryland, Virginia, Florida, Arizona, and Utah. And as soon as California and New York um, really iron out the details of the most recent Supreme Court ruling, I'll be coming to California to get my California instructor's credentials as well as New York City.
Now, this is the first time that we've met, but
Yes, sir.
a lot of people on this show know my background.
Uh-huh.
And while you were on the side of law enforcement, I was on the other side,
Hmm.
uh, especially after I came back from Vietnam uh, from 71 through 82.
And
Just
let me interrupt. I apologize. I've never been law enforcement, and I've never been military. So I've strictly been a civilian my entire life.
Yeah. Well, I took my military background as a Vietnam veteran and put it to other use when I came back. But my question to you is this, because uh, I have a Monday show
Hmm.
and it deals with politics, and
Yes,
one of
sir.
the things that we talk about is guns and gun control.
Mm.
And I made a statement that as a four-time convicted felon,
Hmm.
because I had four strikes before the three strikes law was passed, and then
Hmm.
luckily enough, I found an occupation that satisfied me,
Yes, sir.
and I was able to use my talents in a different way.
Hmm.
But my question or my statement is this: I don't believe that there is an urban setting that I could go into and not be able to find or purchase a firearm within 4 to 8 hours at the most. Why do you think guns are so prevalent in our society as opposed to other nations?
Well, our society was built on violence. So when you look at human trafficking, when you look at the transatlantic slave trade, when you look at chattel slavery, when you look at the dehumanization of human beings, um, that in and of itself builds the narrative for a violent society because the terrorists had to evoke violence onto the people that they terrorized, and then those that were victims of this terrorism had to fight for their freedom. So from that basis, firearms have always been woven into American society because there's a power source that wants to keep people under subjection, and then there's the people who have been, colonized that want to resist. You have that, and then crime culture is big business in American society. So guns are often funneled into at-risk communities so that those same people with guns will eventually commit crimes and, profit uh, various systems, the police systems, the judicial systems, and the penal systems. We call it, of course, the prison industrial complex.
Yeah,
Hmm.
as I said, I've spent some time in it, so
Mm-hmm.
from the foster system on.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting to find out, or to talk to someone who's familiar with firearms and yet has a realistic approach
Hmm.
on how to handle them.
Yes,
The
sir.
second thing that I'd like to talk to you about is the hypnotherapy.
Yes, sir.
Uh, Once again, calling upon my age, these are things that we heard about, back in the day.
Yeah.
But especially, being one that was in a covert setting, or involved in that particular type of life,
Yeah.
a lot of us were, like, what are they going to find out when they put me to sleep? Am I, am I going to commit the other crimes? I mean, what does this involve? Man, I'm not letting nobody do that to me. I don't know what I'm going to. So, how did you get up into this culture, especially as a black man? Because these are things that are kind of counter-suited to our culture, especially when you talk about people my age, or not to stereotype you, but even people your age, because
Yeah.
these are things that were tribal, were foreign, were these were things that I guess if you want to level them, experimental.
Hmm. Yeah. So, I actually have siblings your age, so I feel like you're my big brother already. So, I fell in love with the mind back in high school. In the 11th grade, we had an experiment in psychology class. We went downtown DC to a place called DuPont Circle. And the experiment was one called it was a psychosocial manipulation experiment. And basically, what it was, four of us were group leaders. And what we were to do was to find an area in DuPont Circle and do this very body motion here. This is what we did. And we just stared in the sky while we were pointing in the sky. And what ended up happening after about 12 minutes, all four of us had crowds of people around us looking up in the sky, just as the teacher told us. And people stayed there as long as we stayed there. And it showed how easily humans are manipulated. So I was very fascinated by that, to the point that when I went to college, I became a psychology minor, and then later did graduate work in psychology with an emphasis on applied behavioral analysis. But I have a mentee that introduced me to hypnosis, and I was so blown away of the power that the mind has. So I always said, hey, the mind has power. Oh, wow. Yeah, the mind is powerful. But when I actually saw him demonstrate it, I said, the mind has power that I have no clue about. And, but I got to know more. So I went out to Los Angeles, California, to the Hypnosis Motivation Institute, known as HMI. It's a 130-hour academic program. 130 hours, 128 hours is the average bachelor's program in American colleges and universities. Um, Interestingly enough, the founder, uh, Mr. John Kappas, he was married to I can't think of her given name, but her acting name is Carol Brady. So he
Okay.
was married to her. So I went there to study and graduated from the program. In fact, the graduation was over in Rancho Santa Margarita on a ranch out there, Ornate Ranch. And then later on, when I wanted to specialize in clinical presenting issues, I studied and received my certifications from the International Medical and Dental Hypnosis Association, the IMDHA. To your point, among Black people, what we call hyper religion has kind of steered us from alternative modalities and holistic modalities because hyper religion tends to call things that it's not familiar with the devil, things that it's not educated about demonic. So, generally speaking, even though hypnosis is in the Bible, in the book of Acts, when God put Peter in a trance when he was on the rooftop and gave him specific directives. Most Christians don't even know their own Bible. Uh, so
I didn't.
that's kind of,
Did I forget to tell you I was a PK?
you didn't, but good,
So
good,
yeah,
good, good.
which is also why I have my problems with religion, organized
Hmm.
religion. But
Hmm.
that's another conversation
For
altogether.
another day, right?
Right. Uh, but getting back to the hypnosis,
Yes.
um, there was also. I don't know whether this is true or not, but
Hmm.
there's also a statement that was kind of going around, and I'm using the penal system because this is when I was introduced to this type of stuff. Even
Okay.
though I kind of follow it more now. As I was telling you, I've gotten more into holistic medicine,
Hmm.
especially after I've had a couple heart attacks. But
Okay.
anyway, um, it was said that you wouldn't reveal anything under hypnosis that you wouldn't reveal ordinarily. But if you're in an altered state of mind, how does your mind separate those things? I guess is the question. Fact from fiction.
Okay. So I don't necessarily agree with that statement.
Okay.
What we usually say is that hypnosis won't typically cause you to do something that would jeopardize your health and safety. The way the mind works, you would likely come out of the hypnotic state. Uh, so the mind, when we talk about the theory of the mind in hypnosis, we talk about the fact that the mind is in two quadrants: the subconscious mind and the conscious mind. And the average person has about 12% access to their conscious mind, and 88% of the mind is subconscious, which means that most of the impulses, convictions, most of the emotions and feelings that people have, they're not fully in control of them because their environment at the sensory level has programmed them. The things that they can see, feel, touch, taste, and hear from inside the womb up until a particular point have programmed their belief system. And what hypnosis does, it places one in a hyper state of relaxation. And in that hyper state of relaxation, it gives them more access to the conscious mind. And that more access to the conscious mind helps people um, work through their what we call presenting issues.
But JM,
Mhm.
the very occupation of being a boxer is putting yourself in harm's way.
Mhm.
How does the two equate?
So, are you referring to um,
When you say that you're putting yourself in harm's way, or
so? So I guess you're referring to my role as a sports performance hypnotherapist or sports
Right.
performance hypnotist.
Well, well,
Okay.
well. What I'm kind of referring to is
Hmm.
when you said about putting yourself in harm's way. The
Yes,
very
sir.
definition of being a boxer is putting yourself in harm's
Correct. It is.
way.
It is.
So how do you like how does this compete when one is saying don't put yourself in harm's way and the other is saying, well, I got to feed my family, I have no choice.
Yeah. So that's a difference because boxing is known as a sport and it's known as a profession, right? And people who enter the world of boxing consent to enter into the world of boxing, meaning even if they're not, particularly educated in anatomy and physiology, most boxers at the baseline level have seen retired boxers and they've seen the carnage, they've seen pugilistic dementia, and they've seen paralysis, even death. So boxers sign up for feeding their families, they sign up for a career, they sign up as competitors, but they also sign up assuming that they put themselves at some level of risk. So that's different than um, being in a hypnotic state and somebody telling you to jump off of a roof.
Okay.
And because at that point you'll wake up and say, you tripping, you tripping, you tripping. I'm not doing that.
Okay.
Yes,
So,
sir.
so there's a difference between sports hypnotism and the kind that I would get from my local psychologist or psychiatrist or medical professionals.
Well, so there is a difference between sports psychology, sports hypnosis, and the difference only is in the techniques and the modalities that we use. Um, but we all are working with the mind, and in my case, subconscious behavior.
Okay, now, is this something that is easier to talk about with the younger generation?
Um, so,
Like for instance, when you recruit a young man
mhm,
and you
mhm,
see that he has maybe certain problems or certain things that can be corrected, but maybe he's just not in that spot yet. Do you
yeah,
find young men like that it's easier to approach now than it would be, say, when you 20 years ago even.
yeah, yeah. So, in truth, I'm not the best person to ask that to, and here's the reason why. My initial journey into the workforce was in sales, and the corporations that I worked for spent millions of dollars to train us on how to sell things. So I can sell ice to somebody in Alaska. So I don't really have age is not an obstacle for me. And plus, as a mentalist and as a hypnotist, I don't I don't resonate with what we call limiting beliefs. So um, I can speak to anybody in any race, creed, religion, and age demographic about hypnosis and find success and receptivity.
Okay, okay.
Yep. Mhm.
That's very interesting. Like I said, we are tending to trend more toward uh, Eastern philosophies and toward
We are.
Eastern medicine. I've indulged in a lot of acupuncture. As a matter of fact, I go to acupuncture at least twice a month uh,
Wonderful.
out here, and it has helped me. And of course, there are other things, that are available to us out here.
Mhm.
You have acupuncture, you have cupping techniques, all different kinds of things like that. So, how did you get into boxing per se?
So my dad was a boxer for the U.S. Army um, during the Korean War, and so of course my entire childhood, I heard about every boxing match. We had boxing gloves. He put me in boxing gloves probably by 5, 6 years old, and his favorite fighters were Joe Louis and ironically Rocky Marciano, two rivals. And
But you could watch them on Friday Night Fights, Gillette Friday Night Fights. I remember some of those guys.
and even before then, in his era, because my father was born in 1929, you would listen to them on the
Right,
radio.
right,
Yeah,
right. And
yeah, yeah, yeah. So because my father was my best friend, um, and what interested him interested me, I would go to the library and I would study these fighters, and I'd look at fight um, newspapers on microfiche so that I could have something to talk about with my dad, my best friend. And then when I
I
had
wonder if
it,
there's anybody that knows what microfiche is in our current in our current audience.
don't say I dated myself. Don't say I dated myself. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that was my introduction to the sport of boxing. Because of my dad, I could always box. I could always fight. I never aspired to be a boxer. Never wanted to be a boxer. I was a beast on the football field and the basketball court, and but I never wanted to box. But I always loved boxing, and I've got a very colorful history. I remember the first time I ever saw color TV. The neighbor in my family, the Eaton family, that had money. Shout out to the Eatons. Uh, they had the first color TV on the block. So Muhammad Ali fought Joe Frazier, and the whole neighborhood sat in their living room. And I remember vividly looking at colors on the trunks and the robe and the skin color for the first time. It was like magic to me, right? But in addition to that, I got the opportunity to see Livegate, Muhammad Ali versus Alfredo Evangelista, as well as Muhammad Ali versus Jimmy Young. Some of my 1970 highlights. I was right there at the Capitol Center in Landover, Maryland. So that's kind of how my introduction to boxing occurred. And even though I'm a firearms instructor, the way we settled differences when we were kids, if we couldn't talk it out, we put on the gloves and we went in somebody's backyard, and we settled our differences with the gloves, and whoever lost didn't want to come back and kill you. We probably were racing from telephone to telephone pole after we fought, playing engine number 9 and
two, two,
playing
two, tele,
basketball.
two telephone poles was a touchdown.
It was. Yes, sir.
I remember those days.
I bet you Bullet Bob Hayes got his speed that way,
See, yeah, hey, playing in the project parking lot,
Hmm.
football, two hand touch, but you all up against the cars, all on the neighbor's grave. Yeah, bringing back old memories there.
Yes, sir.
So, how did you incorporate uh, uh, your passion for boxing uh,
Hmm.
with a hypnosis uh, background? motivation for fighters?
Great question. So the great trainer Customato, Mike Tyson's trainer, he has a statement that most people agree with, and he said boxing is 90% mental and 10% physical. So if it is true that boxing is 90% mental or mostly mental, it would it would do fighters well to master their mindset. Um, as I was a student of hypnosis, there were several things that I discovered. Number one, Ken Norton, as you know, gave Muhammad Ali major problems, and he was a relative unknown when he fought Ali. Like nobody knew him, nobody expected him to perform well. He was just somebody to show up so that Ali could float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. After his success in breaking Ali's jaw, they asked him where his success derived from, and he said hypnosis. When Rod Carew almost bested Ted Williams' single season batting average of 400 when asked what he attributed his success to. He said hypnosis in the off season. When Mary Lou Retton ran the table in the 1984 Olympics, she attributed her success to hypnosis. When Greg Louganis ran the table in 1988 Olympics via swimming, he attributed his success to hypnosis. When Mike Tyson discussed his decline, he attached it to Customato not being there and using hypnosis. And when Tiger Woods said that he got away from the things that caused him to be successful, it is what his father, Earl Woods, introduced him to, and that is hypnosis. I have champions in many different sports that have learned the um, the mastery of their subconscious behavior before and during competition.
So, how much of this is the power of suggestion?
Well, we have something that we say in my profession of hypnosis that
If I'm asking you some questions that seem kind of off the wall,
no, no, not at all, not at all. Nothing is off the wall to me. So, in my profession, we have a statement that says everything has hypnosis in it, and everything has hypnosis in it because everything has the power of suggestion in it. So, uh, when I do intake for new, um, when I do intake for new clients, I do what is called a suggestibility analysis. And my suggestibility analysis seeks to determine if a person is in one of three categories or a hybrid of the three. If the person is a emotional suggestible, a physical suggestible, or an intellectual suggestible. That doesn't mean good, better, or best. It just means what it means. And what it means is what your mind does when it encounters data. And what your mind does when it encounters data categorizes you as either an emotional suggestible, a physical suggestible, or an intellectual suggestible, or again, a hybrid of more than one of the three.
Okay, now I've also been uh, taking classes in anger management
Yes, sir.
uh, for quite some time. the last 40, 50 years, whatever. Let's see, Vietnam. So the last 50 years,
Yeah, yeah.
as I said, I came back a rather angry young man, and
Hmm.
I eventually learned the tools that were necessary for me to keep that under control. But have you found, because I can't see where there wouldn't be some suggestions or maybe even outright physical ailments, but after taking a loss or maybe not performing up to their expectations, do you use hypnosis as part of recovery, as you would say someone that was suffering PTSD?
Um, well, the beauty of hypnosis is, um, as professionals, unlike some of the traditional modalities, we don't come in and tell you what's wrong with you. We don't do that. We essentially allow the feedback from your experience to help us determine what your presenting issues is. That's important for me to mention because that is why I don't present, that's why I don't attack it like it's PTSD. I attack it like whatever it shows up as in the individuals uniquely, because humans aren't monoliths, meaning humans aren't one size fits all. So for some people, it might feel like grief, right? For other people, it might feel like hopelessness. But do know this, that in an individual sport like boxing, um, a loss can be a traumatic experience. Like it definitely can be a traumatic experience, um, because it's so public. And then imagine the social media era where, you know,
It's
every,
instantly there.
yeah,
YouTube, wherever, TikTok,
yeah.
wherever.
Yeah, and people are just dragging you. You know what I mean? They just drag you, and they drag you in front of your kids, your family, your community. Yeah, I mean, they got to be brave to do that. You know what I mean? Not just in the ring, but the aftermath as well.
Come on, man. I mean, if you lost a fight after school, everybody knew it. They talked about it for a week. Yeah, I
You
mean,
didn't want to come outside. You
right.
didn't. You
You,
didn't.
so that's why I kind of ask you how it would affect someone, especially a guy that's maybe had that winning record through the amateurs and has
Yeah.
all that publicity and whatnot, and then you know, uh, like a Ken Norton shows up. you know,
Rain on your parade, right?
right, right. you know, so um, uh, uh, I guess we can talk a little boxing here. Sorry,
Hmm.
I took up all your time in there, but
Mm-mm,
I
mm-mm.
thought it was, something that our audience should know, and it's something that's relevant to today.
It's a privilege to be with you and your audience. It really is,
uh,
especially a Steelers fan too. So, you get to do stuff that most people don't get to do.
yeah, I do take advantage of that. Yes, I do. As you can see, it's West Coast Steeler fans, so
Yeah,
I
yes,
rub it.
sir.
I rub it in every time I get a chance.
I know that's right.
you know, but you know, you mentioned your background and how you love to watch the fights. What would you consider your most favorite fight of all time?
Great question. So, my favorite fight of all time, um, is not a fight that was during, um, my lifetime. And well, so I'll answer two ways. I'll talk about the best fight, the biggest fight in my lifetime, and then I'll talk about the biggest fight to me of all time. So the biggest fight in my lifetime was Sugar Ray Leonard versus Roberto Duran.
No
Uh,
mas.
yeah, no, the first one,
Okay, okay.
the first one, because you had the undefeated media darling and Sugar Ray Leonard, American hero, gold medalist, did the unthinkable with the 1976 team and beat the Cuban national team. Like that was unheard of. Um, he's also local. He's from my area, so he's a local hero. And he fought Manos de Piedra, Hands of Stone, Roberto Duran, who was at that time just outright nasty. I mean, he was knocking everything out. He was a mean customer. And even though Ray Leonard lost that fight, the mere fact that it was a close fight, it was a split decision, and the competition was just crazy. The media buildup was crazy in that fight. Um, that was my favorite fight in my lifetime. Um, the biggest fight and the best fight in history to me was Joe Louis and his KO victory over Max Smelling after he lost back in 1938. It was the biggest, to me, the biggest boxing moment in the history of the sport. And for several reasons. Number one, Joe Louis was, as you know, the first black man post Jack Johnson that was even allowed to fight for the heavyweight championship of the world. And when he did that in 1938, if you look at all the documentaries, black people in America believed that they could do anything because the unthinkable had been done. Number one, a black man was allowed to fight for the heavyweight championship of the world. Um, Americans were rooting for him, and then he did it. So to me, that's the biggest moment in boxing history. My biggest moment was Sugar Ray Leonard versus Duran. Either not, that was either 79 or 80. I'm more inclined to think it was 80.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take you back a little further than that.
Uh-huh.
Let's go November
Mm-hmm.
12th, 1972.
Uh-huh.
Alexis Aguayo against Aaron Pryor.
82.
82. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
50
Yeah, I
years,
was in
not 60. I'm sorry.
yeah. Yeah, I was in the 10th grade. I was in the 10th grade during that fight. Huge, huge fight. I was a big Arguello fan. And I can just tell you just off the top, Aaron Pryor stopped him in the 14th round. Um, but I was a huge Arguello fan. I was a little nervous because of how slow he started. And not only how slow he started, but kind of how he was a very robotish kind of fighter. And of course, as you know, the Hawk was a swarming fighter that fought at different angles. He threw punches and bunches. He was Manny Pacquiao before Manny Pacquiao. In fact, can you imagine Manny Pacquiao versus Aaron Pryor at 140? I mean, you might as well just light the fireworks, then just light the city up because it's going down in that fight. But yeah, that was one of my favorite fights of all time.
Yeah. And I've always talked about the Aaron Pryor syndrome. And
Hmm.
that, and I use that term in the fact that here was a guy that was a great fighter,
Yes,
but he
sir.
had a lot of demons, and it
Yeah.
was his demons that ended up getting the better of him. Do you think that in another era that maybe Aaron might have been a candidate for your type of program? Hypnosis. Maybe would have stopped him from being subject to some of those demons that caused a quick end to his career, even though it was an illustrious one.
Yeah, I think that I think that substance use disorder is well, let me back up. I've worked with plenty of people with substance use disorder. We used to call it addiction. The more empathetic labeling is substance use disorder. And substance use disorder covers many things, not only alcohol and drugs, but it also includes food, right? So, indeed, there are many people that find freedom and liberty through hypnotherapy with the presenting issues of substance use disorder, for sure.
Let's see. Who else did I want to ask you about?
Hmm.
Yeah, Mr. Steve Fulton. I'm sure you're familiar with him. He's the Marine that fights,
Yes,
and he's at right now. He's at 122.
yes.
What do you think about Mr. Fulton? He's been rather patient about staying at 122, but is there a big fight to be made at 122?
So all roads lead to, well, first of all, I think Stephen Fulton is a tremendous technician. Actually, the clubhouse boxing community came up with a pound for pound list, but we've done something that nobody else has done. And I'm going to actually, I can introduce it to the world on your show. You're the first one to hear this. I was going to roll it out on Twitter tonight amongst my 2,500 followers there. But I'll introduce it to your audience first. So, ESPN, DAZN, Showtime, Ring Magazine, you name it. Everybody has a pound for pound list. But what nobody has done was come up with a criteria whereby you decide how a person makes the list and then how they are in chronological order on the list. What we did in the clubhouse community, we came up with several categories and we put a point value next to each category and we simply do math. We don't care who your favorite is. We don't care what your opinion is. The math is the math because, as Jay Z said, men lie, women lie, numbers tell the truth. So we just simply do math. And Stephen Fulton, for now, has made our top 10 pound for pound list just based on the math. Now, to be fair, when fighters like, because one of our criteria is you have to have a 20 fight minimum.
Okay.
When fighters like Shakur Stevenson and Artur Beterbiev get to 20, based on the other factors, they'll probably move him out of the top 10. But that still doesn't mean he's not a whale of a fighter. And the big fight that he's in the process of being in a head-on collision with is with Inoue. And that, in a way, is going to move up two weight classes. And he's going to challenge Stephen Fulton. He's already said he's going to knock him out. And Fulton has already said that he's nothing but power. So it's bubbling. And I don't think it's going to take long to make like some of the other fights that we've been disappointed by recently.
Um, that's very interesting. I've always I'm glad that you explained it. It's but not to me. It just seems like analytics is coming to boxing to stay. even though we've always used analytics, if you want to get down to it, at least I believe you have. Everybody watches tape. Everybody, I mean, we count punches, but so I think it's always been in there. But it's good to see that now we have a criteria that everyone can be familiar with, and say, well, how did so and so get there? Well, he had these many points. Boom, boom, boom.
Hmm.
Very simple. Um,
Yeah.
the other fight that I wanted to talk to you about, and I'm sorry I got them out of order here, but I had to go and look it up again. November 10th,
Hmm.
1983.
Hmm.
You talked about this guy before, Roberto
Hmm.
Duran,
Yes, sir.
but this time he's facing Marvelous Marvin, my greatest pound for pound of all time. But anyway, that's
Okay.
another discussion. But do you remember that fight? And when you talk about Duran, do you think that this was one of the fights that actually started his curvature downhill?
Um, Roberto Duran versus Marvin Hagler in 1983 um, was one of the most underrated fights in history. 15 rounds, and wrap your mind around this. A fighter that started at 135 fought the king at 160 and went 15 rounds. And Marvin Hagler even says after the fight how much he learned sharing the ring with Roberto Duran. Roberto Duran gave him everything that he wanted and what he didn't want. And you could see Marvin Hagler had a respect for Roberto Duran um, before, during, and after that fight. So, and that was odd to see uh, Marvelous respecting anybody, but he had admiration for Roberto Duran, and he couldn't stop him. And Roberto Duran gave him work. It was a great fight. One of my favorite fights.
Yeah, that almost any Marvin Hagler fight that you can name is one of my favorites. When Marvin got in those ropes, you knew you were getting all the everything that he had. So
Now, while I do love Marvin Hagler, this is the reason that he's not my pound for pound king. And this is why. His biggest fights were all against fighters that were moved up to the middleweight division. So when you look at Roberto Duran, he started out at 135. When you look at Ray and Hearns, they started at 147. When you look at John the Beast Mugabe, he started at 154. Those are Marvelous Marvin Hagler's most fights, though most competitive fights. Those are his most elite opponents, and none of them were natural middleweights. So that's the only reason that I can't put Marvin at the top. And um, for me, he didn't go to multiple weight divisions. He stayed there. And while his discipline is admirable, um, he didn't test himself in higher weight classes. If anything, he bought guys up from lower weight classes. And you probably never heard that perspective on Marvelous.
no, I've heard it,
Okay.
but I mean, I'm not sure if he's my number one because of course, I watched all the Sugar Ray Robinson, Carmen Basilio fights, and so those
Hmm.
wars. It's kind of hard, but as far as a fighter that just off the top of my head that I like and I would love to watch that's Marvelous Marvin. My greatest regret is that as part of my bucket list, I wanted to go to the International Boxing Hall of Fame there at Conestoga and get to meet him because I know John Scully so well. but
Yeah.
unfortunately Marvin's passed. And you just mentioned Benavidez. Shout out to John uh, as part of his crew. I had John and Russ Amber both on after Arthur's last victory. What do you think
Yeah.
about Usyk
Mhm.
though?
Usyk,
Go
I
ahead if you
think.
want to.
Okay, so I'll say this and then I'll go to Usyk. I was just in a clubhouse room with John Scully the other day. There's a boxing reality show that is about to be produced, and he's one of the mentors in that boxing show. But Alexander Usyk,
Is that the one? Is that the one with him and Larry Steele and
this is the
who's the
one
fighter?
with Coach Ron Sims and many other people. You have boxers. The way it's set up, you have boxers and mentor slash coaches. Uh, it will remind you of the contender with upgrades, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. Uh, Alexander Alexander Usyk, I think, is tremendous talent. We have him. I think he's probably number two or three on the clubhouse pound for pound list based on the math. Because one of the things that we weigh highest is being a undisputed champion. So he gets points from us from being undisputed, from being undefeated, and being a multi-weight champion. So I think he's a terrific talent, terrific fighter, and he's a problem for everybody in the heavyweight division right now.
What about Mr. Bivol?
Bivol doesn't have, for our pound for pound list, he doesn't have 20 fights yet. I don't think.
Right.
Let me.
No,
Uh,
he did
no,
get
no,
bumped
no,
up.
no. Let me correct myself. He is on our pound for pound list too, because I believe he cracked the. Let me look real quick while I'm talking to
I
you.
know. I know. In the ring, he just cracked it. He just cracked. Let's see. The ring's number one light heavyweight. Yeah, he just cracked
What's his
the pound
record?
for pound bump.
What's his
Uh,
record? I'm almost sure he's got 20 fights now. But
let's see.
while you're looking at that, I think that Bivol is Tim Duncan. He's Mr.
Okay.
Fundamental,
Okay.
you know.
Ah,
Uh, and what Bivol is going to do, he's going to fundamental you for 12 rounds. He's going to be defensively responsible. He's going to have great punch placement. He's going to manage distance properly. He's going to um, pressure intelligently. So you're not going to get sizzle from Dimitri Bivol, but you're going to get steak. And he's a tough out for anybody because of being so consistent. And in boxing, being consistent is gold.
where do you have Canelo ranked?
Canelo, because, and this is one of our criteria as well, you Tyson Fury isn't on our list because he tested positive for a PED. Canelo Alvarez tested positive for a banned substance, but not a PED. So he made our list because clenbuterol is not considered a PED, but it is considered a banned substance. So I think we have Canelo at maybe three or maybe around three on the list because he got points deductions because of the positive clenbuterol test.
Now, I want to ask you about that since you
Yes,
brought it up because he trains right here in San Diego, House of
yes, sir.
Boxing,
Hmm.
and he blamed it on beef. He said he ate some tainted beef or something.
Hmm. Hmm.
Is that viable?
Very much so, because at the time he was in Mexico for an extensive period of time, even training in Mexico. He was with his family. So while he does train there, he was in Mexico training and with family. And one of the drugs that they use heavily in the beef in Mexico is clenbuterol. So it is not beyond the pale of reason that um, he would test positive if he was consuming beef in Mexico. That's not like, wow, what? What are you talking? That's not surprising. So people that know. So that is viable.
Well, like I said, I mean, these are questions that I really didn't know about, so that's why I was asking, because I didn't know how viable, I know, hey, not that I go to Tijuana that much, but I might
Yeah.
get a taco or something when I go there, and it is good to know. Uh, So, those of you that are going down to Tijuana, and most of the time, if you go down to Tijuana, the best fights are in the bar, not in the ring. So, I
You
mean,
ain't never lied.
so you know, but yeah. What do you think about a rematch between him and Bivol?
Man, I tell you, um, I
Because
would want.
I picked Bivol to win that fight. I said that there was two people that Canelo did not want to fight, and that was Bivol and Benavidez.
So my thing was this.
And Bivol has had 21 fights.
Yeah, yeah. So he is definitely on our pound for pound list. Maybe he was definitely nine. Now that I think about it, but I thought Canelo looked like trash against an old alcoholic Kovalev. He looked like trash there. And I saw an interview by Kovalev that basically said that he fought for money, and he essentially kind of spoke to the fact that he might have took a dive. So I didn't think Canelo looked good. He looked slow when he fought Kovalev. His arms are short. He's a short man, and light heavyweights just have a bunch of advantages over him. So I really didn't think that someone as skilled and someone as technical as Bivol would be, especially the level of amateur national champion that Bivol was. I just really didn't see Canelo at 175 being able to accomplish that. And I really think the outcome will be the same because he's just too short. His reach is too short, and his power doesn't carry to 175 like it is in 168. Well, 154 to 168.
Yeah. Well, I got three fights I want to ask you about, and I promise I'll let you go.
Okay.
Okay. Shakur and Cruz.
Shakur and Cruz, the the conglomerate of Manny Pacquiao promotions, PBC. Well, not Manny Pacquiao. I was thinking of Masago. Um, Cruz's manager in PBC will not, even though the WBC ordered that, they will not put Isak Cruz in the ring with Shakur Stevenson. Shakur Stevenson will punish him, and I predict would stop him if they fought that fight. Cruz's claim to fame is that he went the distance with a one-handed Tank Davis. So don't I don't want to see that fight.
Um, let's see. The second one, of course,
Hmm.
is Spence and Thurman.
Spence and Thurman. I think that Thurman will be Spence's toughest opponent. Spence will be much different than Ugas, who I predicted would be right in front of him to get beat up all night, and he did. Um, Thurman will provide movement. He will provide ring IQ. He has power. The problem is, as you know, and your audience knows, he's shown vulnerability to the body. And that's what makes the fight intriguing. But I like the fight, and I hope that fight is made. And it's so easy to be made since both are fighting on the same networks, under the same advisor of Al Heyman, and under the same promoter as the Premier Boxing Championships series.
Now, here's why I don't like that fight. Okay.
Hmm.
As you know, Keith
Hmm.
has went from one time to many times,
Hmm.
and I don't think that at this particular stage in his career that he has the legs or the power to keep Spence off of him. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think him going from one time to almost no time is very similar to most boxers. Most boxers start their career fighting overmatched B-side opponents. And as the competition rises, guys aren't going to get knocked out. That's why Earl Spence wasn't knocking out people it was a couple years, several years since he had actually had a stoppage. Because why? The competition has gotten better. And when the competition gets better, guys are more defensively responsible and they have a different level of commitment. Um, but like I said, um, I still think it's a competitive fight, and again, even though Keith has shown some vulnerability to the body, we don't know if he's worked on it or not. And if he has, that'll be a problem. But I still think he's Errol's biggest test to date.
uh, yeah, maybe things have changed, but you know, I always remember in sports there were certain things that you couldn't fix,
Hmm.
and as a boxer, uh, it, is there anything that you can do in order to I mean, of course, cover up different styles and that, but sooner or later you can't stay in that turtle shell. So what does a boxer do when he's vulnerable to body and body punches?
He trains. He trains and strengthens.
Okay.
He strengthens. So that might be Keith being exposed to not being sold out and committed to hurt himself in the gym by training his abs and his core.
Yeah, especially when you get older. I mean, it's
Come on, yeah.
what's next for Bud?
Bud is December 10th or 14th.
Yeah, well, I mean,
He's
I know
yeah,
he's fighting that guy, but I mean,
yeah.
is there a fight out there other than Spence that we want to see, for Bud? I mean,
Yeah.
or are we going to be content having Bud knocking down trash cans?
Well, I think what's next for Bud is a space that boxers rarely get to. That's independence and autonomy. And this fight coming up in Nebraska, in Omaha, against David Evanesian, represents that. That you have a black fighter who has complete control of his career, and he doesn't have the thievery and the predatory financial practices of promoters and other corporations robbing him. So, what's next for him, if he fights on, is having 100% control of his career. If he doesn't, I was just listening to a fabulous interview that he did that it was posted today. He has investments, he has businesses, Um, and he's involved in young fighters like Keyshawn Davis,
Yeah, yeah,
Shakur Stevenson, and many others that he can pretty much pass his knowledge both in the ring and in the business world onto younger fighters. And I commend him for that. Because
yeah,
if there's any failure in black entertainment, it's the people who have won and lost in business and not imparting that knowledge onto younger people that admire them.
yeah. We've talked a lot about the business of boxing, and
Hmm.
perhaps when you come on again, we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yes, sir.
But I want to thank you so much for giving us all your time this evening, and filling in our audience on some subjects that I know I knew very little about. So I thought it was great that we could share those.
Mhm.
And to let you know, you have an open invitation anytime you want to come on the Pugilist Corner. Uh, so why don't you give us your final thoughts for the evening? Tell people they can find you on social media. And as I said, I thank you for your time and we appreciate.
Yeah, well, I thank you for the opportunity to share on your platform. I wish you much success, health, and prosperity, as well as your audience. You can find me on Instagram at CS Firearms Services. You can find me on Twitter at Real Champs 3K. And on Facebook, my business page is simply Champions Solutions Firearms Services. And one thing I will like to say to your listening audience, I do have a course, I have a firearm safety course that I do virtual, and I also have an intimate partner violence prevention and mitigation course that I do 100% virtual. I can be vetted through um, a couple of sororities in the Divine Nine and businesses and groups all over the country. So tap in with me, and I'll be happy to help your family, friends, and groups.
Uh, and I intend to get many more of your colleagues from Clubhouse on the
Yeah,
show.
yeah.
There's always some great conversations on there. You can tell the audience about your Clubhouse platform too.
Absolutely. Clubhouse, if you all haven't downloaded the Clubhouse app, it was born during the pandemic and it's a 100% audio app. You can find us in a space on Clubhouse called Sir Boxing, and that was founded by uh, Sir Cereso Fort. He's a former professional boxer, and he's a gym owner, boxing gym owner in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and he's just opened his newest location out there in the Minneapolis area.
Oh, great! Yeah, we've had Mr. Ford on the show, and we've been on a couple of political shows there called Our Black Voices.
Yeah,
Doing
yeah.
the judge doing the Floyd thing, and of course
Yes,
doing the
yes.
election. So yeah, we're
Yeah.
very familiar with Mr. Ford, and of course some of those other great guys
Hmm.
from that area that participate. They just had a show up there. Not was it a week ago, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, David Morrell fought there.
Right, right, right.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think he's adopted the city. That's where he trains at now, I believe.
For sure, for sure.
Uh, well, JM, as I said, great having you on the show. Look forward to having you back, and hey, I thank you for giving us great explanations on some things. As I said, that our audience, I'm sure, is uh, one we always try to have new knowledge. Like I
Yes, sir.
said, I'm sure there's a lot of guys my age saying, "Yeah, hypnosis, come on, man." But anyway, so hey, thank you so much again, and we look forward to having you back on the show. You have a
Thanks for
great night.
having me, and peace and God bless you. All right. All
All
right.
right,
Take care.
yeah. That was JM from Champs, and we thank him so much for that intimate knowledge on firearms, as well as hypnosis. And when you get a chance, check out Clubhouse. And if you want to get some of this good gear here, go to K9 Boxing. K9 has his own shows, and he has plenty of gear. I have a gold one here. Uh, this is in response to my Steelers' big win on Sunday. So this is the gold winner. But there's also black, red, various colors. Go to K9 Boxing and check them out. Thank you so much for your time. Look forward to talking to you again. See you next Tuesday right here on the Pugilist Corner. Have a great night, everyone. See you next week.